So in the last video I promised that I would implement parse and format using FPTS routing instead, because it's kind of a pain to do this ourselves. FPTS routing takes strings to a sum type and back again. So it doesn't depend on the browser or the DOM or anything, and to prove it, I'm just going to run it in Node. So I'm going to be using Khalil Stemler's Simple TypeScript Starter because I really like it. And here it is. So I've got our sum type here, or our tagged union or whatever, and we've got a parse function and a format function that we've got to implement. And this is a convention in FPTS libraries because a lot of the libraries have functions with the same name, so it makes sense to import them with an alias like this. All right, here's how I want to start. So this is something called a match. And what's going on here is we've got two different segments. Let's see if I can show this here. So when we're at this route, it's got two segments because we've got this guy, which is between these two slashes, and then we got this next segment, which could be anything. So topics always has to be topics. So that's a string literal, lit for literal. And then the next segment could be anything, a param in React Router. And here it could be any string, and we're going to call that string ID. So that'll make sense in a minute, but that's what's going on with match. And now with our match, you can see that we get a formatter and a parser for free. So let's see how you use that. There's a method called parse, and you give it a parser. This is just an internal type called route, so we're going to parse our string to a route. We give it an empty because we're going to check if this string can be parsed by this match here. And if it can't, we're going to return this. So this is all well and good. It's going to get us an object that looks like this. It's going to contain our ID that we got here. But that's not really what we want. What we want is a location. So how do we do that? I'm going to add a location type parameter here. And then we use something called a map, which will take our object and return a location. And our empty value is also going to have to be a location, which is what not found is for. Let's make it prettier. And now this is great. We've got a string, and we're going to a location. And we can return that when we don't get an error anymore. So yeah, if you want, we can just toss this in here, and toss all of this in here. Make it prettier. There you go, you got your parse. So now, our format. We're going to use something called r.format, which takes a formatter and an object with an ID in it. Now, it doesn't like this because a location doesn't necessarily have an ID in it, and we need an ID to format this route. So what we want to do here is put this in an if statement. So all of a sudden that works because it's a topic ID, and a topics ID will always have an ID. Now, we can return our F and otherwise just return a slash. So this was a little weird what we just did here. And it depends on this key being the same as this key. And if this is something else, our parse is going to break, but if this was something else, then we wouldn't have an ID, and this wouldn't work anymore. In that case, there's something called a contra map, which we could use if we wanted, but there's no need for that here. I just wanted to point it out. Let's test this stuff out. Let's see what happens, shall we? Okay, so we got a problem here. It properly puts this in here, and if it doesn't start with topics, then it gives us not found, which is good. But if we put an extra guy after that, it still will match. So we actually want this to be not found. So it turns out how to do that is a little something called r.end. And if we do that, great. So now we got not found for that. Let's test a formatter. This is something that we've seen before, but this is new. I'm throwing us a curveball here. We've got a couple of empty spaces and a question mark. Check it out, it did something. So this is something called percent encoding. So percent encoding just means you can use pretty much any string you want up here. So with FPTS routing, we get percent encoding for free. And it goes the other way if we want to parse this. So that was a good tour of what matches can do for us. Now we want to see how to put a bunch of different matches together. So this just looks like we'd expect it to. Home is just the empty route, yada yada. How do we link these parsers together? Well, I'm going to do this outside of here, and I'm going to make something called a router. If it matches this parser, we're going to map it to this object. And now we're going to use a method called alt. And that means if it didn't match that parser, let's try a different parser. Get rid of this and this. That's how we chain parsers together. So let's just do it with all the other parsers. Great. And now, we want to make a formatter. It looks a lot like our old formatter. So yeah, we've got a type, and it could be any one of these guys. And for all of those cases, we just format, and for not found, we return slash. The formatting is pretty simple, but there's some stuff I want to test with the parser now. When we're parsing an empty string or just a single slash, that will match our just plain r.end. And for about, we've tested adding a leading slash and a trailing slash, or both, and they all work. So FPTS routing has a bunch of edge cases and percent encoding built right in. So that's cool. That's all I wanted to show you for FPTS routing for now, so let's put it into the website and see if it still works. And our format. All right. Still got it. So we're testing percent encoding here. And it works like a charm. Look at that. So the only thing now is that we've made it slightly better, our parsers and formatters, but we honestly still have a lot of boilerplate. So our next video is going to explore Morphic TS, which is going to help us get rid of a little bit of that. So stay tuned.